Welcome, everyone. I'm Anne McBride. I'm the Vice President of Impact at the James Beard Foundation. I oversee our research, training, and advocacy work. And it's such a pleasure today to host you for our 1 year anniversary, more or less, of our Climate Solutions for Restaurant Survival campaign update. I am joined by Emily Solomon, our advocacy coordinator, who is behind the scene but making it all possible. Karen Gasper, our campaign director, and Mike Amato, our campaign communications director. You will hear from both of them as we take you through some of the activities of the past year. You can use the Q&A or the chat feature throughout the webinar to ask any questions of us, and we'll do our very best to answer them as they're coming in. So the goal of this webinar is to give you an overview of what the goals of our campaign were when we launched a year ago, what we've done so far, some feedback that we've heard through the many roundtables we've been hosting around the country, a call to action that we launched earlier this week on what you can currently do, and an update on our Chef Action Summit, which will be in April in Asheville, North Carolina, and we hope that you will be joining us there. So I want to give you first a very brief update on what's happening in DC that is impacting a lot of what's currently feasible. So you've seen a lot of headlines. So this is just making our way through some of these headlines around the focus of this campaign. So the executive branch continues to implement the many executive orders that have been ordered over the last month, which has resulted in laying off thousands of federal employees in every agency, freezing existing grants and agreements with organizations and partners around the country, which has had a lot of effects on the many USDA programs that farmers and organizations around the country benefit from. And so you'll hear about that more directly when we're talking about our call to action later. Congress has started to deliberate their upcoming approach to spending bills, and there needs to be a decision about the fiscal 2025 budget by March 14th. Otherwise, we're looking at a potential government shutdown. So you're likely to see a lot more about that in the news in the next few days. And Republicans successfully passed a budget resolution in the House, which sets the stage for significant fiscal policy changes. Tax reform, extreme spending cuts to offset the tax cuts, debt ceiling increase, increased defense spending, and border security. And this is the beginning of the budget reconciliation process, which will push forward the Republican Party's fiscal policy objectives using a vehicle that only requires 50 votes in the Senate. So this is often used when one party has full control of the House, the Senate, and the executive branch to move agendas that are otherwise considered partisan. So this is what you will continue to be hearing about in the next few weeks as all these things continue to be debated and negotiated in Congress and with the White House. So as a reminder of the goals of the campaign when we launched a year ago, we wanted to mobilize chefs and farmers nationwide to protect climate-smart agricultural funding and provide tools for chefs to lead engagement in their communities. And at the time, we were still thinking that there would be a farm bill in fall 2024, which was a year late. Or that a farm bill would happen by the end of 2024, and we still do not have a new farm bill, obviously. And there has been, as you've read, I'm sure, a lot of cuts to climate-smart agriculture funding, both IRA funding and then other USDA programs, etc. So that has been dominating. So we're still aiming to protect whatever is protectable and to disburse funding that is available. But that's one of the goals of the campaign that is still obviously something that we're working on. We were able to preserve a lot of billions of dollars. I believe it's $11 billion. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong on that, that were for climate smart agriculture. So there have been a lot of wins there over the last year around funding that was passed for climate smart agriculture specifically and climate programs. And then the key goal, oh, sorry, Mike, you went off mute. Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add there's about $12.5 billion remaining that did not get cut last year, so that's certainly a success, and it remains in play right now, and that's sort of the funding pot that we're focused on protecting through the convoluted reconciliation process that Ann outlined, and in the farm bill that may or may not happen later this year, and it's also some of the funding that's been held back by the administration and the funding freeze at the moment. So it's still there, and we're still fighting for it.
Thank you. So we do like to point out the wins because there have been some at a time when it might not feel like there have been a lot of wins on policy, never mind over the last few weeks, but certainly over the last few months and they or the last few years, there have been wins and that's been great. And that has been all thanks to you sharing your messaging. Especially your message which at the core of this campaign on the economic impact of climate change on independent restaurants and farmers. And you've all through the roundtables, through your social posts, through your engagement in DC with your local lawmakers, have made a huge difference in bringing your voice to the forefront as business owners, as entrepreneurs, as representative of your communities, and at highlighting the cost that climate change is having on your operation, the cost that extreme weather events are having when it comes to having to close, having to cut your staff hours or cut your staff completely, not having access to ingredients, having ingredient prices go way up and impacting your bottom line, all these kind of things. So you've been extremely effective at adding this new message to that was not previously heard, really, of making that strong connection of this economic impact of climate change. I mentioned already the elevating your voice as part of that has been very key, and that has been a big success of the campaign. Engaging federal lawmakers in DC and in their home districts. We've had, I'll have a slide on that later, on a number of visits that we've had, and then securing media coverage, another goal that has been met, all thanks to the time that you've really been spending engaging with this campaign. The top line since our launch last February, we've had 82 conversations with lawmakers or their staff at the federal, state, or local level on both sides of the aisles. Very importantly, this campaign has always been a bipartisan campaign to really be able to reach everyone who votes in the agriculture committees in the House and in the Senate, and really stressing the fact that the economic impact of climate change is something that touches every state, every city, every community, everywhere, and everyone needs to play a role in making changes there and in supporting the funding that helps mitigate the effects of of climate change. We've had 1,000 chefs who've taken actions through in-person roundtables, signing a letter we did last May around the Farm Bill that went to the Senate and the House. We've had over 60 earned media hits. So this means these are articles that have been um, either articles or broadcast where the reporters reached out to us to be covering that. And then over 900, almost a billion really, but 900,000 earned media impressions. And then we've had 800 plus attendees at 12 events we've had in person, and high activity also on social media. So there is no question that this is a relevant message and that you've all contributed to this being heard. We launched last February with Jose Andres. The campaign is anchored by a report we did with George Washington Universities around the economic impact of climate change on the independent restaurant supply chain. It was really, really critical that we had that data. And that's what the core of the campaign has been. All the engagement with lawmakers. It's been a combination of providing the data that really shares the big picture story, if you want, and then the personal testimonies that you've all shared and the impact that it has had more specifically on your businesses with your stories. The launch itself was covered by 186 broadcast outlets, 119 newspapers. So already from day one, a huge amount of impact around it. We've done meetings in DC last May. We brought chefs to DC, and last December we brought chefs to DC again. We've had roundtables in DC. We did a Hill briefing, a virtual Hill briefing last March. In total, we've had over 30 Capitol Hill meetings. And again, on both sides of the aisles, we've brought chefs who had both Democrat and Republican representatives and had meetings that were all very successful and very positive, with a message that was really, really heard. As I mentioned earlier, one of the goals of the campaign was to bring your voice to the forefront. And it's been fascinating to hear lawmakers say, oh, I never thought of restaurateurs as small business owners necessarily, or I didn't think of farmers as small business owners. So by meeting with them and sharing your stories, you've really been able to change their minds on a lot of things. We've also had chefs do their own media around this, and you can find all the toolkits on our website that help you do that. As I mentioned, 60 earned media hits that include JJ Johnson doing both a guest column on the Food Fix newsletter, as well as an op-ed in Time magazine in the winter. Chef Dan Jacobs from Milwaukee, who just hosted us last week, was on public radio in Milwaukee and had a number of articles written about his efforts around climate change in the fall as a result of his engagement around this. And then Chef Ricky Moore in North Carolina, who was also featured in Cardinal and Pine, was really a local story around how climate change is impacting him. And then a couple more things around all of the events that we've had. So we have been in 12 different cities over the course of the year, a few times in DC, obviously, in Minneapolis, in Portland, Maine, in Atlanta, in Milwaukee last week, which, by the way, Milwaukee in February, that shows the commitment to the campaign. It was minus 25 degrees and over 40 people came, chefs and farmers, some driving as far as from 3.5 hours away to be part of that conversation, really showing the fact that the urgency that everyone is feeling around these topics. And the goal of the roundtables have been to have conversations between chefs and farmers, lawmakers, local organizations, and media to share those stories about the local economic impact of climate change, for the chefs to be hearing what they can do, a reiteration of the message, to be sharing with their representatives, and then the news coverage that came with that. And on the right is a photo of Senator Boozman from Arkansas, whom Micah Klasky, a chef who participated in our boot camp last summer, invited to join him at his restaurant. And Senator Boozman came, and he came with his chief of staff. Micah had invited other chefs from the community and farmers, and they had an hour-and-a-half long conversation around the impact of climate change on Micah's restaurants and on the chefs and farmers who were there on their restaurants and their farms. And it was just a very rich conversation. So these are some of the examples of events that we have been doing. And from all of these roundtables, we've collected obviously a lot of information, a lot of data that will inform your tour of the campaign. And I will pass it to Karen to take you through some of these key findings.
Great. Thank you so much, Anne. I mean, I would just say across the roundtables, the impact of severe weather on independent restaurants was undeniable. You know, lifting up the personal stories of what chefs and farmers have gone through has taken the statistics and put it into real life terms. Even before a storm hits, restaurants experience reduced traffic, and post-event recovery can be a long uphill battle. This was brought up with the recent hurricanes in 2024, hitting both the East and the Gulf Coast. While alternative power sources can help, they don't fully offset all of the challenges. Restaurants still struggle with reduced customer flow, powering their entire operation, and supporting employees. In Houston's restaurants try to be self-sustaining, but the generators can't power an entire restaurant. In some cases, the restaurants become de facto support centers for the community, providing food for workers and neighbors and a place where people can charge their cell phones. Farmers also shared losing entire crops and infrastructure due to extreme weather. One farmer shared their personal story at the meeting that Ann just referenced about losing their entire farm due to tornadoes in Arkansas. So the impacts are real, and your stories really helped make it really clear how this is affecting folks personally. Um, you know, when we're looking at extreme temperatures, they are disrupting both farming and dining. Long-standing farming practices have had to be adjusted. The knowledge shared by past generations doesn't hold true when facing hotter, wetter, and drought conditions. Seasonal tourism has experienced declining visitors, especially in places like ski areas. This was brought up in Colorado. Restaurants relying on outdoor dining must invest in costly adaptations to withstand extreme heat. And also, the impact of wildfire smoke can be felt hundreds of miles away, disrupting outdoor dining. This was brought up in both California and the Midwest. We heard consistently that climate change is disrupting local fisheries and agriculture, making it harder for restaurants to source key local ingredients. Rising ocean temperatures can make it impossible for some restaurants to offer signature menu items with locally sourced seafood. More support is needed for sustainable practices that help restaurants adapt menus based on available local ingredients. Conditions such as drought and blight can wipe out essential ingredients. And sourcing unique ingredients has becoming increasingly challenging due to climate related disruptions. Specialty crop farmers are facing financial challenges, while aspiring farmers struggle with the barriers like land access and limited capital. There is a strong interest in sustainability, but in some cities, a lack of government support makes it costly and difficult to implement effectively, especially without consumer participation and education. A reoccurring theme was the need to educate consumers on the impact of their choices. For example, using the entire animal, more plant-based options, using in-season ingredients, and using compostable containers and actually composting them. A key focus of our campaign was reinforced the urgent need for support for climate smart and sustainable agricultural practices. This came up again and again in these conversations. Farmers consistently cite land access as a major barrier. At a recent roundtable in Miami, a farmer had to move his operation 35 miles away due to a landlord not renewing the lease. Sonia, a chef and farmer who recently authored a blog that you guys can find on the website about the campaign, shared her personal experience of relocating her farm and hauling soil cultivated over years to the new site. Rising expenses across the board create a consistent challenge, with restaurants fearing customer backlash if they're forced to raise prices, and delivery apps are eating into those thin margins. The roundtables have been instrumental in shaping our approach and informing the future direction of this work. So, Anne, I'll turn it back to you to talk about. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you so much. Took me forever to find the mute button in this view, so same for unmuting. I was saying to myself that there's two anecdotes that I just want to mention to add to all of the brilliant thoughts that you've shared already. That really resonated from a roundtable in LA, a chef there who has a Thai restaurant, is Thai, cooks Thai food, and no longer has access to cilantro roots because the soil is too warm. So the cilantro bolts before forming roots. And so this is creating real questions around, she uses scallions as an alternate, but it causes real questions around what does it mean to be a Thai chef cooking Thai food when you no longer have access to an ingredient that is key to the flavor identity of your cuisine as well, and to the flavor profile. It's not just consumers who are complaining or who are saying this doesn't taste like what I'm used to, but it really poses some identity questions around these changes to something that is so deeply ingrained in your culture and in your heritage. And that is something that a lot of media have picked up on, because these bigger questions that bring the cultural element really have resurfaced a lot. And then we have a survey also where we've been collecting, your data throughout the year, and we'll link it in the chat. We'll link the page on the website where you can find it, to be able to share that information, share how extreme weather events are impacting your businesses. And one that has really resonated also when talking again with media and lawmakers, similar to the cilantro root example, because it's so tangible. A chef in Connecticut who runs a local regional seafood restaurant, who found himself last February without any seafood to put on the menu, because there was just nothing there. So that's what do you do when you have a restaurant that's centered around a specific ingredient category from a specific region and there are none. We heard a lot about that in Maine also, around lobsters moving, warming waters, etc. So, or in Georgia, the fact that the pecan crop was 80% decimated by the hurricanes in the fall. All of these ingredients that are so anchored in specific places and are disappearing, this has a real impact on the identity of entire regions and of businesses. So moving ahead on what we're planning on doing in this coming year, we want to continue focusing on in-state events, on having these roundtables, and focusing on continuing to go to some of the places where we have been in this past year and deepening the engagement there. Because what we have found through the roundtables is, in so many places, almost everything is in place for the connections between chefs and farmers to be deepened, for chefs and farmers to have greater access to one another, this path to market that is really critical from an infrastructure perspective. One thing that we heard over and over again is the fact that every chef who participates in a roundtable obviously works with local farmers, but can always use more. And one chef in Denver was saying, there's a beverage person in my restaurant every single day. Where is the farmer who's coming with their ingredient, with their bag of beans, etc., to taste with me? So how do we provide support there? We want to continue to provide data and research to inform policy discussions and to inform lawmakers. So continuing to share the data we're collecting and your personal stories around all of these very critical topics. We're about to enter the next hurricane season. We're about to enter the next fire season in a lot of places. Although, as we saw in Los Angeles, there is not really any such thing as a season for extreme weather anymore. It's really 12 months happening everywhere. Continuing to maintain chef engagements through webinars like this, through our newsletter, etc., through our social media. And as I mentioned, continuing engagement with elected officials in Washington, D.C. as well. We're not giving up on the potential of federal legislation to be supporting the kind of agricultural practices that will make your businesses more sustainable, give you greater access to the kind of food supply that you are looking to have from a regenerative and sustainable perspective. And speaking of that, I will pass it to Mike to take you through our call to action.
So this would not be a campaign webinar if it did not round out with a call to action. And I think everything that Karen and talked about are the sort of longer term pieces that we're working on that are happening regularly. But as a campaign, we're trying to make sure we take advantage of moments to highlight stories and impact. And right now we're in a pretty critical one with the executive branch freezing access to a significant amount of funding that we've been fighting for, the IRA funding for climate smart agriculture. And so in this moment, we'd love for you to share your stories and lift up your voices on social media. You should have received an email from Karen, I believe, outlining some tactics and tools to do that. So I just wanted to highlight a couple pointers there. One is to really show up in those videos as a business owner, as part of your local economy and employers, and articulate the impact that climate is having on your businesses and the impact that the current funding freeze is having by withholding those funds. So I'd encourage you to show up as a business owner. Keep it short and heartfelt. Really speak from and tell your own story and how you're being impacted. Try to keep it between 30 and 60 seconds. Anything that goes longer sort of struggles to get traction online. And then there's some other tactics in there about like lighting and whatnot. But show who you are in the background and where you stand and the sort of people that you're supporting in your local economies, and tell your story. And I think we've seen over the last couple months that or the last month or so, as this freeze has impacted folks, real stories that bubble up on social media have really had an impact in articulating to those that are making decisions right now, what's happening and the negative side effects of their decisions. So call to action, use the hashtags that are in the email so we can see your story and make sure we're tracking it and can lift it up on our end. And thanks for everything y'all are doing to support the campaign.
Thank you, Mike. Can you clarify for anyone who might be wondering, this is money that there are contracts signed for this money. This is not money that has not been allocated, because you will hear so much conflicting things around what has been frozen. So this is money that should legally be disbursed.
Yeah, and not just legal. I mean, these are signed contracts that farmers made business decisions around, anticipating these dollars coming in. And so they put their own money in. This isn't all just government money. These are a lot of cost share contracts. So they spent their own money to get to this point. In many cases, they've hired contractors or employees to support the work. And as we head into growing season right now, the government made the decision not to honor those contracts in many cases, and that's left them in a pretty terrible situation where they're losing money or they're on the hook with their own contracts that they don't have the funding for. And it's really put them in a pretty bad spot. And so it's important that we have voices from across the political spectrum and from across the economy highlighting the impact that that's having from your fellow farmers and your partners being hurt in that way. So it's a real moment and a real moment of impact. This is not future dollars that are going to go out the door. This is money that was expected now and has really put farmers in a terrible bind.
Thank you so much, Mike. And really, the fact that we are in most parts of the country at the start of growing season means if these farmers do not get these funds, you will not have ingredients to put on your menus, right? So that's the connection that as business owners, you can be making in those videos. This impacts you directly because you're at the risk of not having anything to be serving to your customers.
Yeah, and farmers operate on slim margins like restaurants do, and so building their business plan around anticipating that money coming in and then not having it happen. I mean, it's not extreme to say that many of these folks could even go under.
Indeed. I'll share also another action you can take. Join us at our Chef Action Summit in Asheville, North Carolina, April 6th through the 8th. This is our biannual advocacy event. The registration is free for that, and the hotel, when we met with them, said, chefs make no money. We're supporting that by giving you the lowest possible rate we can provide. And so we've been very grateful to be working with our partners in Asheville and with people who really get it. I'm sharing that because you know that the community you'll be joining is not just the community in the room, but is really the entire community surrounding the event. Obviously, Asheville was hit drastically in the fall by Hurricane Helene. The community was devastated. Businesses have been devastated. So it's a show of support for, we have over 300 people registered so far to be coming to Asheville. All of you showing up and telling your peers in Nashville that you want to be with them there. And it's sending a national signal, really, that Asheville is back and North Carolina is back in action, and people should be making plans to go there. Beyond being in Asheville, obviously, the reason to go is to deepen your advocacy work. You'll hear from experts on the current political climate. You'll get strategies to take your advocacy to the next level. You'll get the opportunity to work with people who are from your state and your regions on strategies that are more specifically for those for your part of the country or your state or city, and the opportunity for you to be sharing what's happening in your business, in your community, etc., and work together around this report back. We'll cover business resilience, we'll cover climate, obviously. We'll also talk about hunger relief. The Farm Bill, 80% of the Farm Bill goes to SNAP with drastic cuts there. So there's a lot of opportunities for advocacy around that as well. Immigration, obviously, and how that's impacting your business. The fostering of local food networks, as I mentioned before, as outcome of our roundtables. And we're hoping that you will leave the summit feeling that you both know better how to build a community in your cities, in your states, but also really feeling that you are part of a community of committed advocates, of people who care as much as you do about our industry, about our food system, about people in general, and how do we work all together to really make a difference, covering everything that needs to be covered, that needs to be addressed, that needs to be advocated for, from all different sides, because all of us are working on different elements of it. So again, April 6th through the 8th, Asheville, North Carolina. You can go to our website, jamesbeard.org. There's a direct link right here, but you can also find it under the Impact Department events, our industry events, and just register. And we very much look forward to seeing you there. And I'll just add here this slide with our email address, impactforward@jamesbeard.org. Reach out. You didn't get the email that Mike referenced with the CTA email, we'll send it to you. There's a script in there you can follow, and there's more of the notes there. You have questions about Asheville and the Chef Action Summit, reach out. You want to do something in your community, you're not really sure where to start, you've looked at the toolkits on our website, but you still have questions, reach out. There's no reason to not email with any there's no topic too big or too small, and this is the email address for anything pertaining to the Impact Department at JBF, so use it as much as you need. And the link below that is the link to our climate campaign page on the website. You will find everything from the last year, from the launch webinar to other webinars we've done, one in the fall, for example, around the definition of regenerative agriculture, because that's a topic that has come up a lot. Our report with GW, a two-pager take action summary, social media tiles, all these kind of things. Everything is there for you to be using as you need. So visit the campaign page on the website as often as you need for any resources. And I'm going to stop sharing so I can see if there are any questions. All right. No question. So wonderful. Again, if you have questions that surface after listening, email them to us, reach out to us. No issues there whatsoever. I want to thank you so much for joining. We wanted to just share this update with you in a more visual and auditory fashion than all the emails and other ways you have to reach information. Sometimes just the visual part makes it easy. So thank you all so much for your engagement with us for the last year, for all the work you're doing, for all the work that you're doing on your own constantly to make this industry and this food system better. And we're just so grateful for everyone who works tirelessly on making things just a little bit better. Mike, Karen, nothing would be possible, and Emily, nothing would be possible without any of you. So I'm just so grateful to have had the chance to work with you three over the last year, and look forward to more. Bye, everyone. Thank you.